Greetings, stranger, and welcome to the coins. I'm glad to see you've made it here. The Precipice Quarter can be quite taxing on the soul. I could have taken you here straight from the Docks District, as the coins shares almost all of its southern border with its endless rows of warehouses, but I think one needs to acclimate properly to the unique environments of the city at the center of the world before stepping into this particular financial maelstrom. Here, the trade flows freely and endlessly over everything money can buy, and quite a few things that it can't. Merchant lords live like kings, but they also rub shoulders with the impoverished citizens of Mudhaven, as well as some of the city's most hardened criminals. The crime rate is quite high here, and you would be wise to keep yourself alert to even the most innocent-looking individual. That said, I have deliberately chosen to start us in a quieter part of the district, where many of its temples and artisans can be found. My route will take us northwards at first, towards the coin's wealthiest estates, but then we will head westwards and make for the Grand Bazaar, which is undoubtedly among the most famous locations in Absalom. Our carriage will not be able to pierce through it directly, so instead we will shadow its southern flank as we make our way towards the foreign quarter. And finally, we will see how the wealth of these earlier locations contrasts so poignantly with the poverty of the district's southwestern blocks as we break through and out. I must warn you before we begin that many of these points of interest number among the most crowded in the whole city. Absalom can be noisy even in the witching hours, but the ambience here is on another level entirely. People will clamber up to the cart offering wares and services. They may try to force things onto you, or, more distressingly, entice you off the back of the carriage. Do not worry during this tour, though, as the dampening magic I cast at the start of my docks tour still protects us from the worst of the noise, and my tours are always warded against unwanted intrusions. Nevertheless, take note of the atmosphere, and prepare yourself for it occurring all over again without my protection if you decide to return here in the future. Some people can live and breathe this hyper-urban environment, but in my experience, most can only tolerate it in short bursts. Well, with that said, are you ready? Excellent. Let's get underway. We'll begin our tour with a temple. Yes, indeed, religion features more prominently than you might think here among the money changers. Specifically, let me indicate this stoic building. It is the Gallery of Innovation, and it is dedicated to Bry, the goddess of invention. Also known as the Bronze Lady, or the Whisperer in Bronze, debate endlessly rages on whether she was granted her divinity as a fleshly mortal, or one constructed and gifted sentience. From the Gallery of Innovation, her worshippers tinker endlessly in the fields of alchemy, metallurgy, and technology, seeking to reach ever greater heights. It is also an enormous hub for non-worshipping artisans, who set up shop around the temple to offer their goods and services to the interested. The most senior inventors of the gallery often give public lectures from the steps there, and if one is presented by the head cleric, Flindish Tanwell, then the crowds would be heaving even here. After all, everybody wants to be notified of the next elixir of life or god-creating stone. So far, though, nothing has quite engendered that level of power. Another temple lies just up this road, albeit one that fell into disuse over 100 years ago. It is that one, with all the colourful bunting. This building had been consecrated in the name of Trud the Mighty, the dwarven deity of defence and steadfast bravery, especially for the protection of the weak. For a rather minor god worshipped only by a small minority of Absalom's population, it was impressive how much this temple grew, stewarded by its shrewd high priest, one Mochen Stonechins. Unfortunately, it was ultimately revealed that he had been embezzling funds from the temple's treasury, and Stonechins was forced to flee Absalom in fear and shame. Mockery from local newspapers led to the shrine being renamed the Temple of Lost Coins after the scandal and district, and it stuck. Indeed, it stuck so firmly that even I do not know what the building's original name was. Anyway, this transpired over 100 years ago, but recently a new group of thieves, calling themselves the Forthright, acquired it for their headquarters. Their enigmatic leader, known only as the Harlequin, ordered that the site be dressed in this decoration as a symbol of its new management. You may ask how a thieves' guild can operate so publicly, and the answer to this very sensible question will be given in good time today. There are actually two complementary reasons, but for now, just know that any sense of religiosity in this temple dissolved a long time ago. In the meantime, let me show you the youngest and most mysterious of Absalom's so-called great schools. Behold, the Clockwork Cathedral. It occupies an entire block by itself, and land is not cheap in the coins, having been purchased about 50 years ago by an enigmatic, robed figure remembered only as the Assembler. Prior to their arrival, which was alone upon a gigantic iron ship that somehow navigated through the Flotsam graveyard unhindered, this site was occupied by a temple to Asmodeus, the divine lord of hell. The temple had recently been razed in a fire of uncertain origin, but the ruin was swept aside literally overnight by the magic of the Assembler, who transported his vessel to this block to occupy it. Believe it or not, that same ship is what greets your vision even now, for over the next few days and weeks, the Assembler oversaw its meticulous and precise reconfiguration into what we now call the Clockwork Cathedral. Thus was this great school founded, but the mysteries of the place only begin with its origin. The Assembler disappeared into the hallways of their new building, and has not been seen since, while the school they founded is now run by a council called the Ruling Escarpment, whose members are also never seen in person. And as for what it teaches, well, that should be obvious, I hope. Engineering, of course. Mechanical, in particular, though elements of architecture, design, alchemy, and other miscellaneous technologies are also part of the cathedral's unusual curricula. There are no public standards for entry. Anybody may apply to study within its turning halls, yet that does not mean there are no requirements at all. Indeed, trying to determine exactly what qualities are sought and privileged by the ruling escarpment is a seemingly impossible task, because their decisions in this matter seem arbitrary. Geniuses have been rejected, while humble yet ultimately average students have been accepted, and vice versa. Tuition fees, too, appear to be set completely at random, for their amounts and deadlines vary from person to person. In fact, even the teaching itself is usually undertaken by senior students. You see, the staff of the cathedral, the many clockwork constructs notwithstanding, only teach the advanced classes, which are only available to students who have passed at least one basic class. The basic classes, in turn, are taught by advanced students who run highly independent and mobile study groups called cognates. Each cognate typically specializes in a particular field, and rarely does it meet on cathedral grounds. More usually, the senior students designate a time and place for instruction somewhere within Absalom, though often the location will be tied to a point of interest to the course. For example, a cognate teaching metallurgy could meet just down the road at the Gallery of Innovation. The reasons why basic courses are not taught inside are twofold. Firstly, while the cathedral is extremely well equipped with workshops, laboratories, and other facilities directly relevant to its pedagogy, there are no other amenities permitted on its grounds. No places to purchase refreshment, nor to consume any brought in from home. Neither will one find a privy anywhere in its halls. Secondly, the halls and corridors themselves are constantly turning, with immense gears literally opening and closing pathways all the time, seemingly at random. I say seemingly because there is an undeniable logic to the system. There are patterns that can be deciphered. Indeed, to attend an advanced class after passing a basic one, a student must determine where to present oneself and at what time their chosen course begins. Failing to attend the first seminar of an advanced class to which one has registered results in an immediate 1-year suspension from advanced class participation. If you find this setup quite concerning, you are not alone. There are many who treat the Clockwork Cathedral with some suspicion, even contempt. In fact, the 2 previous Primarchs, including Lord Gear himself, personally stormed into the cathedral one day early in their tenures, demanding to speak to an authority figure. There were concerns that the cognates could be infiltrating critical engineering and infrastructure projects, you see. Both Primarchs were granted an audience, and both left tight-lipped about the meeting's minutes, but thereafter completely supportive of the cathedral's presence. The whole ordeal has been unusual, to say the least. But at the end of the day, there can be no denying the results. This testament to engineering continually produces first-rate engineers, and graduates even of a few basic classes are widely respected by employers and academics. Absalom's technological advantage is strengthened by the cathedral. Of that, I have no doubt. I should point out to you that these sites were not part of the coins 10 years ago. As I discussed in detail on my Eastgate tour, this area used to be part of a separate district called the Merchants' Quarter. I only mention this because it explains why our next point of interest is located where it is. This winding slope has been taking us up onto Misery Row, the widest and most infamous road in the whole city. If something can be bought, it is for sale somewhere in the coins. So goes the old saying, and this old slave market was a testament to its veracity. You would not find any of the token guard here, though. Oh no, they dared not show their faces on Misery Row, where people were, for much of Absalom's history, bought and sold like cattle. They always pretended that this was part of the Merchants' Quarter instead, as this street did indeed mark the border, but it was always a paper-thin excuse. First, let me tell you about the design. Misery Row is an extremely wide, elevated street, with almost all entrances being narrow, heavily guarded stairways. The slope we used was for carts and wagons only. Pedestrians needed to use the steps in order to be inspected by the legions of private mercenaries who prevented any slaves from escaping. The augmented dimensions of Misery Row allowed slavers to construct elaborate living and workspaces beneath us. These sprawling complexes housed everything from straw-lined sleeping rooms to beautiful stay-houses for wealthy clients. It was not uncommon for the slaves sold here to be skilled artisans in their own right, scribing and prostitution being especially common trades, and clients would require proof of these skills firsthand before committing to a transaction. Do not get me wrong, though, there were also plenty of labour slaves whose living conditions were no better than those of verminous animals. They were often sold in blind auctions. Do you see the grates in the cobbles there? Hands would sometimes find their way to the tops, and emaciated, pleading fingers would claw through in desperate appeals to compassion. But there was no compassion to be found here, not ever. The slave traders ran Misery Row as their own petty kingdom, and the occasional sympathetic individual who was caught trying to free slaves was usually killed on the spot. The authorities did not care, any more than they did when those same individuals occasionally found success in freeing slaves, for as soon as they exited Misery Row, their crimes would usually be waived. This is why security was so heavy on these narrow steps. Of course, slavery has been prohibited in Absalom for about 6 years now, having been finally abolished once and for all after the Black Echelon Uprising of 4717. Yet look around you. The businesses that have established themselves here all sell cheap labour, and the employees are often paid in vouchers rather than Absalomian money. These businesses avoid being brought down on slavery charges by the thinnest of margins, and only the unscrupulous are seen conducting trade with them. You also do not have to look very hard to penetrate the illusions spun up by many of them and find legitimate slavery beyond. Still, the practice has been relegated to a tiny and explicitly criminal network compared to what had been transpiring here before. This enormous archway that marks the northernmost point of Misery Row is called the Eternal Shackle, named after the brazier that hangs from its top. Specifically, it was named after the flame that burned eternally within it, but as you can see, it has since been extinguished. The flame died, seemingly by itself, on the same day that slavery was outlawed in Absalom, while it had first been lit, also seemingly by itself, in 4325, on the same day that slavery was legalized. Thus, the shackle has long been seen as a symbol of slavery in the city at the center of the world, and it is today used as a shrine by followers of the god Caden Cadian, whose love of drink is matched only by his hatred of holding power over another. Until it burnt out, the shackle was instead used as a shrine by followers of Droska, the dark smith of the dwarven pantheon. These followers resent the shackle's new management and have been petitioning the Coin Council to let them repurpose it in the image of their god. Indeed, the holy symbol of Droska is a flame burning beneath a stone archway, so it would be easy to believe that this was constructed as a shrine to him. However, this belief is actually incorrect. I sense traces of arcane magic in the stone, which itself is far older than the worship of Droska in Absalom. No, I think the brazier came later, and once you remove that, it strikes me more as a gateway to something. A gateway that perhaps could be opened again. No, but such is Absalom. Nothing is exactly as it seems, and history, religion, magic, and politics all intersect everywhere you look. Now, as we finally leave Misery Row behind us and venture into the northeastern parts of town, we are first greeted by this immaculate marble building. This is the Prophet's Academy, a business school founded by two devotees of Calistrade a number of years ago. The esoteric mystic Calistrade wrote his prophecies as a guiding philosophy of sorts. They include strict adherences to set diets, clothing types, and even sexual proclivities. If these are followed, Calistrade claimed, then great material wealth would be guaranteed. While not a religion in the strict sense of the word, many have described being a calistocrat as following a religion in business, and I have found that description to be quite accurate. The most prominent calistocratic faction is the cult of Druma, which runs Withron House in the Wise Quarter, but other schools, like the Prophet's Academy, also jostle for followers' attention. I am told that the fees here are becoming more exorbitant by the term, but its networking opportunities are unparalleled across the Inner Sea, which the merchants of the coins find invaluable. This neighbouring estate boasts quite unique architecture, no? Those hedge mazes look like some noble's passion project, born from spending too much time at home in the Petal District. But in truth, this is the Taurean Embassy, and it belongs to Noir Spiritskin, the Prince of Minotaurs. Now, if you know the first thing about Minotaurs, then you know that this title is nothing more than a facade. Indeed, it was bestowed upon Spiritskin as a reward for saving Primarch Gear from assault, who was grateful to have the chance to elevate someone with no connection to the Shadow War for a change. Though the political message he sent by doing so was quite clear, this Primarch rewards his friends. This estate was created with the title, and Spiritskin has been living here quite comfortably ever since. The story of the Minotaur is quite an interesting tale, actually. He was born as a rare albino ghost bull, supposedly blessed with powers of divination. This belief garnered him enough influence to try for the leadership of his tribe, but he failed and was exiled as punishment. Naturally small in stature for one of his kind, Noir Spiritskin wandered his native Kortos for a while, lonely and dejected. And then he chanced upon Lord Gear being attacked by sailors and intervened. And the rest, they say, is history. These days, I believe spirit skin is strongly associated with the Pathfinder Society, especially with Grandmaster Torch. The Society would certainly be welcoming to someone with local knowledge of the island's Minotaur tribes, who have increasingly begun to worship the Demon Lord Baphomet, much to everyone else's deep concern. But on another entirely coincidental note, this next building is called the Second Labyrinth. I know what you're thinking, but I can assure you that it predates the Taurean Embassy by many years. Point of fact, those gargoyles betray its architecture as being Chelaxian, and indeed the labyrinth is owned by the influential House Tevenegg. You might recall the name Tevenegg from my Puddles tour, as the brine prison there is run by Lady Saitia, who also hails from the same Chelaxian dynasty. This establishment specialises in gambling rather than slaves, however, and it charges a 1 silver entry fee for anyone who is not a recognised friend of the house. While you will find the usual suite of cards and dice games at the labyrinth's tables, the two most popular games are actually a unique card game called Maze, and more recently, a highly addictive Vudrani game called Druge. Oh, and in case you are wondering what the first labyrinth could be, the name is a reference to the natural network of caverns and tunnels that riddle the deepest parts of the island. Completely submerged in the sea's salt water, legend tells us that soon after raising Kortos from its watery resting place, Aroden had to venture into these caverns to defeat a terrifying creature that he had unwittingly raised with it. As to what that creature could be, well, it varies depending on who is telling the tale. I might offer more detailed analysis at another time, but for now I can tell you that the Labyrinth of Absalom is a very real and very dangerous place. We'll turn south here to approach the Grand Bazaar, but as we begin to about-face, make note of this road to the west. It leads to the Al-Hakam Estate, an extravagant home that holds the dubious honour of being the place most frequently targeted for burglaries in the whole city. It is inhabited by Emir Thalzar Gartan and his husband, Akir al-Hakam, who is one of the Pathfinder Society's most important financial backers. Al-Hakam's continued economic success has been a cause of much celebration to many a Pathfinder agent who discovers funds suddenly made available to them following a previously unsuccessful sponsorship application. Such are the whims of the free market here. Next to the Al-Hakam Estate is the Wachail Estate, owned by Lord Navum of House Wachail. Until recently, Lord Navum was an extremely influential figure in the district, second only to the nomarch, Lady Mylena of House Armson, because he held the title of Slave Overseer and was thus responsible for all of the district's flesh markets. However, since the practice was abolished in the city, House Wachail has fallen on hard times. I understand that Lord Navum now hosts increasingly disreputable people from his fortress-like estate, fostering ever grander delusions about magically replenishing his lost power and fortune. Both of these estates lie opposite one final, important building. Before the Merchants' Quarter was absorbed by the coins, it was said that there was an even balance between the two districts. One held the money, while the other held the influence. Today, however, no such distinction exists, if it ever did, and nowhere is that more evident than in that building, the Grand Dance Hall of Kortos. Its 4 stories are always packed with business leaders, senior merchants, and the nobility, not to mention the dozens of talented dancers and acrobats that are paid luxurious fees to entertain those audiences. In truth, though, this theatre is little more than a front for the Shadow Wall, for the upper 2 levels are by invitation only, and reserved for some of the Inner Sea's most influential figures. It is said that the entire economy of the region is carefully planned and negotiated from the balconies and saloons of the Grand Dance Hall. I think this might be a slight exaggeration, but only slight. The figures you see entering and exiting this building are enough to confirm those rumours, and that means that we can only speculate about the figures you don't see coming and going. This block to our left houses the Guild of Spears, a mercenary company that specialises in high-value, local merchant protection. Before slavery was abolished in Absalom, it was the spearmen who enforced the slaver's will along Misery Row. Their reputation is excellent, however. The Guild of Spears contracts to anybody who will pay for protection, and even offers the option to imbue their weaponry with customised magical or mechanical augmentations to suit a client's needs. The building houses its own forges, you see, and has fostered good relations with both specialist cognates of the Clockwork Cathedral and mages within the College of Mysteries, to ensure that they produce only the finest arms and armour for their mercenaries. To our right, meanwhile, is the block containing the headquarters and administrative offices of the Union of Carpenters, Stonemasons and Woodcutters. The services of these specialist labourers are also held in high repute, not least for the Union's flexibility and willingness to negotiate custom terms for unique projects. After all, someone had to build the majority of the buildings that compose Absalom, and, the odd esoteric wizard notwithstanding, most of those foremen, site managers and construction workers were ultimately hired from this group. Hey, maybe one day you will have accumulated your own vast fortune and desire to spend it all on some manorial estate up on Aroden's hill, eh? And if so, I suggest you open discussions with the Union before committing to hiring anyone eager to take your money. Now if you look down the road to our right, you can catch your first glimpse of the Grand Bazaar. Don't worry, we'll get closer. For now, I actually want to point out to you this building, right on its edge at the end of the road. Its distinctive purple roof gives it away as the Saucy Wench, a bar, brothel, and general dive for the curious. It enjoys a good reputation among the locals here for being stable, meaning you are less likely than not to be mugged, pickpocketed, or outright murdered around the premises. And trust me, for an establishment offering intimate services in the coins, that is astonishingly good. The main reason for this has nothing to do with the building itself, though, which is as smoky and disorienting as any other dive, and everything to do with its owner, who is none other than Guard Captain Kythus Finch. She has ensured that her own establishment is a small bastion of safety in an otherwise shaky district. The token guard does not have a good reputation in Absalom, as you can probably tell, but they will at least prevent you from being assaulted in plain sight while on their own commander's property. Probably. This building to our left is the headquarters for an organisation called the Band of the Palm. They specialise in doing dirtier labour jobs that most people prefer not to dwell on, like chimney sweeping, sewer sweeping, and junk peddling. On the other hand, some services are more palatable, like wheelwright consulting or hiring attendants for bathhouses. But regardless, the band's headquarters is not so much a single building as it is a series of interconnected floors across an entire block. Those catwalks there are not just for show. Runners frequently traverse them to deliver news and money to their superiors. I suspect that this complexity is by design, because the band has very close links to one of Absalom's largest and most influential criminal gangs, the Bloody Barbers. They are active in almost every district, although they try to keep a low profile on principle. The Barbers believe that skimming a little bit from everyone is much safer than investing time and resources into infrequent, high-risk bank heists or home invasions. These buildings here extend several stories underground, though the public passages that lead there have long since collapsed, so you would need to hire a guide to navigate the rubble safely. One false move could bring a fatal amount of debris crashing down onto your head. And don't look at me, I have no interest in mapping out this particular ward. Let's instead turn our heads northwards and enjoy the real reason most people venture into the coins. We have now reached as close as we can get by carriage to the Grand Bazaar. Thousands upon thousands of tents, booths, stalls, carts, and all their attending merchants occupy the Inner Sea region's largest single marketplace day and night. The setting sun does nothing to stymie the flow of trade here, for lanterns are lit to illuminate the area. Neither does the disorienting maze deter the thousands more enthusiastic shoppers who come to find their dream items. The light, noise, and general brouhaha are so great that this district employs dozens of time callers whose sole job is to walk the footways of the bazaar and call out the time as the hours arrive. Trust me, you will lose track of time without them. The most important part of the bazaar, I think, is that its permanency is composed almost entirely of very transient installations. That is to say, any given market stall or booth only hires their location for a short period of time before they must pack up and give way to the next eager merchant. Thus, if you were to visit the same spot on 2 random days, you would be greeted by different merchants hawking different wares. And this is the true appeal of the bazaar. You never know quite what you'll find, or who you will encounter. Whatever you desire, even illegal goods and services, of course, is in this maelstrom somewhere, but because you have to go hunting for it, you are forced also to consider hundreds of otherwise irrelevant merchant stalls on the way. And at least one of them has a good chance of convincing you to open your wallet for something, and so the money flows ever greater. That said, there are a few points of stability in the bazaar. The eastern area is bestrewn with red flags and bunting which delineates its stalls from the rest and identifies the zone as the Red Silk Route. Officially, this is simply an area for hawking items of a personal nature, and indeed, mementos from down-on-their-luck noble houses and adventurers' collections can be found therein. However, these are greatly outnumbered by the number of stalls instead selling drugs, sex, booze, and illicit variations thereof. It is one of the few areas of the whole district where you are guaranteed to see squads of token guards undertaking regular patrols. The other point of stability is the official overseer of the Grand Bazaar, currently one Butuzu, called the Panther. His swift rise in Absalom's fighting arenas was followed by a meteoric reputation for fairness and justice over his predecessor, the previous overseer. The Panther is skilled at turning up seemingly from nowhere to mediate significant financial disputes before things get out of hand, which is a quality appreciated by all. Of course, sometimes an individual is operating on a strict budget, both in money and in time, and cannot afford to spend either navigating the shifting, twisting pathways of the Grand Bazaar. In such a case, I would strongly encourage them to instead visit this building coming up on our left. This is Humboldt's Outfitters, the best-regarded general store in the whole city. Run by the ever-helpful Gron Humbolt and his wife, Lady Melina, anything from trail rations to climbing axes can be found inside this impressive emporium. Its success has exploded in recent years, largely due to the steady influence of Lady Melina, and smaller cadet stores under the Humboldt name have now opened in the Foreign Quarter and Westgate. As you can imagine, these are notably popular with caravanners and adventuring types. Much like yourself, I suspect. I should note to you, however, that Humboldt maintains a strict policy on not selling magical items. Magic can be very bad for business if you do not know how best to handle it, and the Humboldts prefer to leave this side of the adventuring life to their close friend Angleton Embray. Embray is the master dwarf blacksmith who runs Embray's Armory in the Ivy District, as you may recall from my tour there. Okay, now this next building to our left offers us the perfect opportunity to discuss law and order in the coins in appropriate detail. This is the Bail House, the headquarters of the District Guard here. Notice how its entrances are gated and barred? That is so that the token guard can survive short-term rioting, which is becoming a somewhat more common occurrence here. You see, the token guard lives up to its unfortunate name. Officially, it refers to the copper buttons of their uniforms, but everybody knows that it is a recent fabrication to veil the fact that bribery and corruption are the order of business in the bailhouse. The guards do not have time or motivation, really, to conduct investigations, so their modus operandi, when confronted with a crime scene, which, by the way, will only happen if they are paid to turn up to one, is simply to arrest everybody nearby and hold them all in the bail house until bail is paid, hence the building's name. The token rate is only 1 copper penny per arrest, but it is not uncommon for wealthy merchants to bribe the guards to deny bail to their chosen suspects. The system is designed so that unfortunate bystanders can bail themselves out easily, but the merchant's targets often need to fork out large sums of money to be released. This carries an underlying assumption that the merchants are somehow omniscient and incorruptible, which is a statement so comically false that the guards are terrified of a powerful merchant family turning against them. So far, Guard Captain Lady Kyther's Finch has been able to maintain this delicate balancing act, but I think it is only a matter of time before a huge scandal brings the whole system crashing down on itself. Now this golden spectacle is the House of Commerce, the headquarters of the District Council, creatively called the Coin Council. While they do technically hold the power to set the tax rate of the district, this is in practice decided back in the Grand Dance Hall's upper floors, so the local councillors do not need to do very much at all. The building is therefore better known for being the home to Absalom's unofficially official foreign coin exchange, which sets the trading standards for other nations' economic relationships with the city-state. This task has nothing to do with the local council, though, and everything to do with the powerful Lady Selene of House de Muck, who, bemusingly, is the nomarch of the Westgate district instead. This building also houses a branch of the Bank of Arbadar, in case you are in need of a loan with divine backing. This block to our right houses the Free Union headquarters. The Free Union represents all those freed from slavery in Absalom, but particularly those who were freed for their defense of the city during the Black Echelon Uprising of 4717. Being only 6 years ago, this dramatic moment in the city's history has not faded from the minds of the liberated, and the Union does all it can to push back against institutions, laws, and proposals that it considers anathema to liberty and justice. Of course, many noble houses and rich businesses have found it difficult to adjust and balance their books in this new post-slavery era of Absalom, and so there remain considerable tensions between the Free Union and Absalom's old money bastions. Nevertheless, the Free Union remains a popular organization, as people have not forgotten the invaluable contribution Absalom's slave population made during a brief but extremely violent uprising that coincided with the Primarch's disappearance. We're about to turn a little southwards to the poorer part of town, but first let me indicate to you that block there, which houses a small-scale commodities trader called Mother Sphinx. Located just outside the Grand Bazaar's influence, Trademaster Horner Shan runs a seemingly inefficient business kept afloat purely by luck. However, the reality is quite different. It is well known that Mother Sphinx is a layperson's gateway to the district's criminal underworld if mediation with gang leaders is needed. This true business rakes in more than enough coin to keep the official business afloat, though I have heard rumours recently that even these black market dealings are themselves a front for something even more sinister. I have not had the time to investigate yet, but perhaps this would be something you adventuring types would enjoy. Now beware this building on our left. I know it looks identical to its neighbours, but take note of the taxidermied dogs peeking out of its upper windows. They betray this place as the Kennel, the headquarters for one of Absalom's youngest but most violent gangs. They call themselves the Family Dogs, after these very same canines, and operate mostly in the protection racketeering business. Their leader has an almost obsessive interest in taxidermy and punishes debtors in repulsively relevant ways. It is thanks to the Family Dogs that many of Absalom's children are now growing up with a new bogeyman keeping them awake at night, the Stitch-Lip Man. There are no prizes for guessing what punishment the Stitchlip man hands down to his victims who do not go to sleep on time. These final blocks here are Mudhaven, the poorest area of the coins. Comparable to the Puddles in many ways, there is nothing like immense wealth next door to contrast the poverty and squalor of this neglected part of town. Token guards never venture into Mudhaven unless they have over 24 allies protecting them, because violence against them is more or less guaranteed. The murder rate of Mudhaven is second only to the Puddles, and petty crime might even surpass it. Yet quotidian life here goes on. People work, play, eat, sleep. Employment is higher than the merchants would have you believe. The truth of the matter is that there is no reason Mudhaven needs to exist. It is just that the local council is entirely composed of rich merchants and nobles who would barely acknowledge its existence. Even from a purely pragmatic point of view, the return on investment the coins would see from regenerating this area would be enormous, but decades of economic advisors have so far failed to persuade their councillors of that. There is one house down this road, right in the heart of Mudhaven, that locals refer to as the Crystal Palace. I understand it is the home to Absalom's youngest thieves guild, in the demographic sense of the word. Children and teenagers, most of them orphans, have flocked to the palace to join the group of pickpockets calling themselves Dodd's Filchers, named after the young half-elf Melina Dodd. It is certainly a brave decision to name a pickpocketing gang after oneself, but perhaps quite unfortunate should one then decide to disappear and apparently leave the group one founded, as Melina Dodd has done. Nobody has seen her in many months now, and I do worry for her welfare. But still, her filchers are growing strong, and have so far avoided the attention of rival gangs by virtue of all being children. No one in the Bloody Barbers seriously considers a ragtag group of child thieves to be a threat. Or at least, no one is brave enough to suggest that to their bosses. And there are glimmers of hope emerging from Mudhaven. The most notable is this building right on the border with the foreign quarter, called the Guiding Hand by locals. Its pristine condition was designed by its proprietor, Turn on the Wind, to shame wealthier residents of the district by poignantly contrasting it with the facade of every other building in Mudhaven. Needless to say, magical wards protect it from dilapidation. The Guiding Hand operates as a soup kitchen and temporary boarding house for the homeless. Turn on the Wind, an Ilverani, or snow elf, was appalled to observe the conditions under which residents of Mudhaven are compelled to live, and has dedicated her mission to the elven goddess of community, Findalad Lara, to do what the council will not. Her support also extends to employment opportunities for Mudhaven's homeless. She petitions many local businesses for apprenticeships on their behalf, and has been surprisingly successful. While her work is admirable, it is unfortunately just a drop in the ocean of Mudhaven's poverty. And finally, as we make our way north, out of Mudhaven and the coins, and into the foreign quarter, let me also indicate this building with a sign over its door that simply reads Home in common. This is an orphanage run by the half-orc Rhet Tafmar. Rhet's home is well regarded by poverty experts in academic circles. I understand that the children here are looked after far better than many orphanages in even wealthier districts. For one thing, Rhet personally inspects all prospective adopters' homes and lives to determine suitability and compatibility with the children under his care. And he also rejects offers of help from poisoned chalices like the family dogs or even some of the local churches. His commitment to authenticity has proven to be a double-edged sword, though, because his own meagre income is barely enough to keep the home afloat. Nevertheless, his work has been outstanding in the community, and countless children have been saved from premature deaths in workhouses or on Absalom's streets by his charity. Well, there we have it, the coin's highs and lows. Overall, I consider this district to be little more than a function of the wider city, actually of the wider world in many ways. There is little in the way of residency or culture beyond the few blocks that occupy the former merchants' quarter, and those who do live here are often temporary visitors to the city on matters of business. Really, the residents of Mudhaven are the closest you have to a full-time population, which makes their plight all the more disheartening. However, it must be said that the economic success of the district has fueled much of Absalom's power throughout history, and the city certainly cannot survive without it. We have now arrived in the foreign quarter, a microcosm of the whole world packed into a single city district. It would be my pleasure to show you around the place, especially considering the relevance of the Grand Lodge of the Pathfinder Society to so many of my passengers. But you must give me an hour or so to conclude some personal business first. I suggest you venture back to the Grand Bazaar and get stuck into its dizzying array of tents and boutiques. There is no comparable experience anywhere else on Golarion. Why not see if you can find some ancient artifact for a bargain price? Just beware of the thieves, okay? And then meet me back here as the sun begins its final descent, and I will take you on a tour of the city at the center of the world's most diverse district. Well, until then.